Thank you all for joining us. I am also an immigrant into this country, came to Oregon when I was 14 years of age, not speaking any English, and so had to learn it fast. I'm still learning it. I have been in education for over 20 years. I have been a teacher, school administrator, and currently as a central office administrator. I'm excited about the influence and the opportunities that I have to really create some real change that benefits our families of color. In all families, we know that at the end, everybody wins.
Thank you, Olga.
All right, thank you so much, Olga. Carmen, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Shelley. Carmen Gelman, buenas noches. Carmen Gelman. I am the principal of Milwaukee High School and Milwaukee Academy of the Arts in the North Clackamas School District. I was born in Los Angeles, but moved to Mexico and then came back when I was 9. So as an ELD student, even though we didn't get services back then, but just have a lot of experience of being pushed out of schools and, you know, loving education till I came here and just felt really pushed out. So started college later in life, and it's just been my passion to do this work and help kids and families be successful and to help them navigate the system, because the power of education has completely transformed my life and the life of my children and their children. So I'm very excited about tonight. Forgot to say that my pronouns are she, her, and ella. And just excited to be in this work with folks and see how we can best support our students, particularly our ELD students who we know are struggling in this time of being in CDL.
Thank you, Carmen. Perla.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Perla Rodriguez. I'm a first-generation Chicana, born and raised in Oregon, native Oregonian. My parents are both from Mexico. My mom's from the state of Jalisco, and my dad is from the state of Zacatecas. I'm also very happy to be here, mostly because I feel very much like a learner these days and these weeks and these months. And I you know, I'm struggling in a lot of ways as an educational leader. I'm a principal of a pre-kinder through 6th grade dual language school in the Forest Grove School District. And I'm struggling, and I feel like I'm a sponge right now. I'm really trying to pick up ideas and strategies and articles and books and anything that people can suggest to share for all of us to kind of get through this stage that we're in. And, you know, I have ideas that I'm, you know, excited to share with folks today, and really just happy for an opportunity to kind of verbalize and process out loud some of the stuff that's floating around in my head. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Perla. Thank you so much to all of our panelists today. And I know that we have one more panelist who's going to be joining us a little bit later this evening.
She's actually here. She joined us.
Excellent.
So
Thank
Maida,
you so
do you want to go
much.
next?
Maida.
And I think we unmuted her. Let me look. I thought I did. Yeah.
Maida?
Oops.
Okay.
There we go. I think she's
Here.
now unmuted. Hola, Mayra.
That's why I wasn't speaking, because I was muted. So I'm Mayra Gomez. I am currently the Director of College and Career Readiness for the West Wilsonville School District. And I'm also the Vice Chair for the School Board for Gresham Barlow School District. And I'm the chair for El Programa Hispano, which it's a nonprofit that provides services, sustainability services and empowerment services to the Latino community. And I've been in education for 18 years. I don't regret a single one. This has been the toughest because it was the first time that I didn't get to greet students on the first day of school. And that is one of the best days of the school year. And it's been tough in different ways. I'm also first generation Chicana like Perla. And my family's from Michoacan. So I grew up very brown and proud. I grew up in Los Angeles, and that pride, that cultural pride, it was very, very obvious in my family. And I grew up thinking that I could do anything and I could be anything. I didn't know that my community was seen through a deficit lens from others until I moved to Oregon. And it wasn't until I was a high school student that that I felt what racism felt like, and that I felt what doubt felt like. And that's why I went into education, because I didn't want students to continue experiencing that. I want to disrupt that, because unfortunately 20 some years later, my students still tell me they experienced that. So anything that I can do to disrupt that is what keeps me going. And that's why I wear so many hats, because if we don't do it, who is? And we're not going to be waiting around. Our kids are not going to be waiting around. The other thing that keeps me going is knowing that so many people are in this struggle. So many people before me have been amazing mentors, and they've been able to do it. So of course I can. And having that support system that I can go to when I do need to cry is also what keeps me going, and it's a great support. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Gracias, Mayra.
Thank you, Mayra. And for all of our colleagues here on this call, one more reminder that yes, we are recording today, so thank you so much. And if you would like to rename yourself or add your pronouns, you are certainly invited to do so. I wanted to just take a moment to point out how our panelists and our guests here today have identified. And I will model that one more time for you. I'm Shelley Reggiani in North Clackamas. I am a biracial Vietnamese white educator who was born and raised in Oregon in a bilingual home, a home that had 7 generations of Oregonians and first generation immigrants, and raised in a time where ELD services, like Carmen had mentioned, didn't exist. I'm a little bit older than Kenny Lau, but raised in a time where I could fully recognize some of the things that our colleagues have talked about in terms of the intersectionality of race, language, and culture. And these conversations are really important for us to think about of how we personally identify and how we show up. That's how our communities perceive us. And it's really important for each of us to have that metacognition and think about how we show up for others and what it is that brings us to this place of education. And today, our theme, our purpose is that we are creating conditions for community and partnership within our Latinx community and schools. And we're here today to learn from each other, to learn strategies, and to raise our own critical consciousness, to begin to examine the policies and practices in our schools that can open doors for our Latinx communities to thrive in a time of CDL. I love how you said, Mayra, standing on the shoulders of the mentors before you. And that's our calling. That's who we are today. We are at a place of leadership for each one of us, regardless of the seat you sit in the organization where you work. You are in a place to allow others to stand on your shoulders, where you're creating the conditions to improve education. And tonight, our focus being specifically on our Latinx community. So thank you, each person, for being here this evening. I wanted to start us out with a native land acknowledgement. Many people in Oregon are beginning to recognize the value of doing so. And I wanted to start and model that for us here tonight. We acknowledge the land on which we are meeting today in what is now called the state of Oregon, rests in the traditional and the indigenous lands and village sites of the native peoples, representing over 30 different tribes and whose descendants now make up the Burns Paiute, Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw, Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of the Siletz, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua, Coquille, and Klamath. We take this opportunity to offer gratitude for the ability to learn, work, and be a community on this land, and we offer thanks to the original caretakers of this region. We recognize the historic policies of colonization that have led to genocide, relocation, assimilation, and language genocide that have affected Indigenous and Native families, both past and present, and that will affect those in the future. We honor their resilience and the revitalization of our Indigenous and Native communities, and we pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have been the stewards of this land throughout generations. Thank you. To begin us off this evening in this conversation with colleagues, I wanted to encourage each of you that this is our time to learn from one another. And while we're going to be having a conversation with these amazing women who are on our panel this evening, as we progress throughout this afternoon, there will be a time where I will open up the chat and then we can hear from you and hear the questions that you may have for our panelists. I wanted to thank our panelists one more time for the vulnerability that they're coming with tonight. We have members who have signed up for this webinar who stretch all the way from the south coast of Oregon to the far northeast corner of Oregon. We have some colleagues joining us from California and from Washington. So we represent multiple places all over this region. And thank you for being here. This is our struggle together. And we're doing this transparently and with vulnerability and humility in front of you. So thank you for joining our conversation as we just, as leaders together, as colleagues, explore how we can remove barriers for our Latinx communities, especially during this time of a political divide within our nation, and also in a time of CDL when we are not fully connected to our communities. So I'll open it up by asking our panelists, what is challenging for you right now? What are some things that have served as barriers for you, either as a leader in reaching your Latinx community specifically, or for our Latinx communities in connecting with schools?
Olga, would you like to start on that one?
I can start.
Yeah, thank you.
So for me, and I work for the Hillsborough School District, what has been challenging is that the limitations that we have had with meeting families face to face, meeting families at their level. You know, we as a system have created resources for students, but have been limited with how much we are able to provide to support families, for example, with technology. So we are meeting with parents on a very regular basis now, but it took us a long time to help them understand how to access the Chromebooks that their children were using, to access Google Meets or Zoom to engage in the meetings. And so that is still a challenge that you know, I am encountering myself with. My family liaisons are asking me, can we buy laptops or Chromebooks for parents? They are asking. Parents are asking because they feel bad. Some of them feel bad taking them from their students when they're doing homework. Even into the evening, some of the students are doing things and they need their Chromebooks. So sometimes they are engaging in meetings using their cell phones. And because they're on cell phones, sometimes they can't access the PowerPoints or the presentations well, or they can mute or unmute when they need to do that. So that is one of the challenges that I'm facing, is how to navigate the resources and the systems to be able to provide parents with those resources. The good thing is that I have seen a huge increase in parent participation. It's interesting, despite the challenges, I have seen at every meeting, we have more than 50, 60 parents attend at one time. Whereas when we were organizing meetings in person, it was, you know, smaller, 30, up to 30, maybe 40 parents, and we were excited. And now it's like they're joining, using their cell phones, their tablets, whatever opportunity they have to join, they're joining. Some of them are cooking and cleaning the house as they are talking and listening to presentations and helping their children with homework and things like that. And it's just beautiful to see that level of interest and engagement. And I just so much want to be able to meet them halfway and give them the technology that they need, so they don't have that, that challenge of having to take the technology from their children.
Thank you, Olga. I think technology has been one of those challenges for many of us, for all of our students, but specifically for our Latinx community. Like you mentioned, another piece to that would be the power differential. So before, for the parents having to take, the students now have a higher level of understanding of the technology, and that with it brings the power to power over parents, I guess I would say. And so when you're talking about getting laptops for the parents, it actually would help not only to decrease the isolation of some of our parents that otherwise don't have connections with other adults, but also if they learn that technology, it would also allow them to have a more of a level playing field and be able to connect with teachers and all those other pieces. Thank you. Perla, do you want to go ahead? And then Carmen, and then we'll have Maida.
Sure. So the question is something I am struggling with. And for me, I think I would narrow it down to my greatest struggle being having to reconceptualize what my role is right now as a building principal. It's not the actual work itself. It's not learning new things. It's that my work, my job as I know it, is completely different than what it's been in any other year. And it feels very much like I'm learning how to do this work that I care so deeply about, and wanting to resist just going to my playbook. I've done this for a whole lot of years, and I'm actually in my pre-pandemic life pretty good at this job. And so I find myself still wanting to say, it's easy. Okay, let me go to last year's folder, last year's file, to strategies when I was a teacher. None of that serves me right now. And so sometimes it's really exciting for me, but I also am very aware that I don't have 27 tiles looking at me every day for hours. Really, I have the luxury of just time, or having the ability to control my schedule and to really embrace this as an opportunity. And I'm very aware that the people that I'm leading have none of that right now. And so it's even hard, even framing a new idea or strategy. I have to think about, how do I say, hey, I have an idea? Because if I were teaching right now, I think I would say, I don't need a new idea. I don't need you to be figuring out cool apps right now, Perla. But that's where I'm really stuck, is I feel often, many days, like I'm not sure what to focus right now on. And so I'm spending a lot of time asking teachers, how can I help? What can I do for you right now? What is needed? Or doing a lot of the tasks that I just know there is nobody else to do. Whenever we're done with this meeting today, I have 2 hotspots that I'm driving and dropping off with families to help log them on. And it feels like I'm never doing the most important thing that I should be doing at any given moment, but I can't ever really articulate what I think the most important thing is. So I'm
Perla, you mentioned before in one of our conversations, how is that different within, like, you have a dual language program school, and you also have a large concentration of Latina families, and there's different things that you've named that you are actually doing that have that positive impact and bring families in and help them get connected to that technology. What are some of those?
Yeah, I mean, we are doing a lot of outreach. At our youngest grades, pre-kinder, kinder, and first, we are doing weekly or bi-weekly curriculum drops at homes, and it's very structured. Families know we have a system where it's, we'll pick up work from here. At that level, we just cannot rely on the computer interface for our youngest kid. We need to still work on things like like fine motor development. Students need to cut and they need to trace and they need to write and color. So we are doing weekly, we will go and drop off materials and pick them up. We want learning to still be, have dimensions to it. So we're dropping off materials for kids to start planting something so we can do science units to watch it grow. And it's definitely not something that our district expects us to do, but we know that that's what our families need. We're also modeling a ridiculous amount of humility, and our families are in our homes too. And so we're not hiding anything. We're saying like, sorry, that's my son. He's blah, blah, blah. Yeah, what are we going to do? And we're also trying to continue to do the things that we know our families like culturally. When we were celebrating milestones, my son DJs, so he came into the cafeteria. We were all socially distancing. We would let families like send in songs that they wanted to hear, and we're saying, you better, we were live on Facebook, on our school Facebook, saying, everyone, you need to be out of your seats, we're sitting too much. And our mascot was dancing cumbias, and that's still very cultural for us to take that mental break and to share in, fun times together. But yeah, those are just some things that I can think of off the top of my head.
Perla, that is amazing. Now, you mentioned live on Facebook as a way to connect with folks, and the need for each of us to think about what is the preferred path of communication for our families. Number one, in the language they prefer. Number two, in the communication mode they prefer, and a bi-directional communication. So there's an exchange. It's not just a one-way coming from the school, but an invitation to participate. Carmen, earlier today, you were talking about the use of live Facebook as well. How are you engaging with our Latinx community?
Well, I do want to start out by saying I think we have a really powerful team that does a lot of outreach. Our engagement specialist, the district family liaison, and our instructional assistants. And they created a Facebook in Spanish. And so tonight will be my first live Facebook event, which I'm excited about and a little nervous because I'm learning too. But, the things that I'm noticing with our Latinx families is that we are very, we like to we're relational, and we bring food, and my families bring food, and we're relational, and it's very, we don't have to have the big PowerPoints. It's all about talking with one another and just being in each other's presence. And that's been really difficult since we can't do that. But I'm excited about the live Facebook event, because one of the things that we're recognizing is that there's so many emails going out by so many different people that it's just overwhelming for our students and our families. And a lot of our families, they don't read their emails. The Facebook is an easy one. So I think that that's going to be an event that we're going to do regularly. And I'm really excited to have that experience with them. I'm noticing just some things for our students that are really difficult. And that is that, a lot of our families are also essential workers, and the students are also working. So some of our students are working to support themselves. And they're working 30 to 40 hours. And so in some of these businesses, even though there's laws, right, that when kids are in school, they don't work past a certain time. And some of our kids work until 2 o'clock in the morning. But you get caught in the middle, because it's also, that's how they're going to survive, right? Like that's how they can help the family, or they can pay their bills. And so balancing all of that with also, for a lot of them, not knowing how to access the technology. So it's not enough that they have a Chromebook, right? Like, how do they navigate that Chromebook? How do they upload pictures? How do they scan documents? How do they, move around in that space? And looking at what kinds of videos are translated and all of that, and what isn't. And so we saw a gap. So us principals actually got together today, and we're going to create our own videos. We're going to take what are the videos that are critical that we can use district wide, rather than each building doing something, but how of us at the secondary level, and even at the at a younger ages, if we create videos that can be used district wide in many different languages. So we're going to do that together as a team. We don't have time to waste. Recognizing when there's gaps, right? Like I think that's really important, is how can we share with one another, just like we are right now, and instead of reinventing the wheel. So I am concerned. It's shifted even what we're doing. We had professional development yesterday morning, and it was around supporting our ELD students and special ed students with some particular strategies that folks could use, that are just really good strategies and good ways of teaching for all of our kids. And we know if our Latinx students are successful, they're all successful. So.
Thank you, Carmen.
Mhm.
Do you want to go next, Maida? Oh, you're muted again. See if I can find it. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to start taking it personal, Karen.
I know. Ay, mírala.
I mean, every challenge that has been mentioned, I'm facing as well. And I think the personal challenge for me right now has been the feeling of powerlessness, because I see the need, I see that something needs to be done, but not being able to is such, it's an awful feeling. I feel powerless. And I've shared before with friends that since this started, there hasn't been a single night that I've been able to sleep through the night, not waking up, thinking about what's going on, thinking about the needs that haven't been addressed and what consequences that's going to have for our students, for our families, in the near future. So that's been one of the biggest challenges for me. And also that when something is mentioned, when something is pointed out, that, you know, if a school or a school district isn't being culturally responsive, and I point that out, all of a sudden it becomes my job.
Yeah.
And I don't mind the work. I don't, because I know what I'm doing and I know it needs to be done, but there are only so many hours in the day.
Mm.
So how do I build capacity so that it's not always me, right? How do I build capacity so that I'm not the only one pointing things out and add more to my workload?
Mm.
Right? Like it shouldn't just be a small group of us pointing out these inequities or pointing out, you know, the needs, and when we're not being culturally responsive to our families. And in some instances, even being offensive, because who are we to speak for our families, and who are we to say these are the needs and this is how we need to teach them to do things, right? So how do we empower our families? How do we give them that space? And I'm feeling like I don't have that space, because when the pandemic started, I thought it would be such an opportunity for innovation to disrupt an education system that has not been working for our communities, for our BIPOC communities, not just our Latinx communities. So I thought this is such a good opportunity to disrupt this system that hasn't been working and that we've all known isn't working and haven't been able to transform it. And there hasn't been time for that. Like, I don't know about you all, but I'm so busy that there isn't any time, like, to just sit down and reflect and think of how to make things better, how to change things. It's like, it's so reactive. Everything is so reactive, that opportunity that I thought was there or is there, I haven't been able to take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that we get out of it, we have something better. Karen.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was right when you were saying, Maida, the decisions that are being made in each of our schools and school districts are coming very quickly. Mm-hmm. And what I found oftentimes was that raising my hand going, what about the English language learners? What about the immigrant? Well, we're figuring out the system first, and then we'll get there. And that's the wrong way, the wrong approach, right? Because we know that they are part of our system. So every time we speak about special ed students, or we speak about any student, we need to have at the forefront the students that we know that from March to the end of that school year last year, we were failing. And that's what we need to put first. And when we are, you know, constructing these new paths for education. So from each of you, we've heard that there's actually some ways that you've been able to interrupt, and some the policies that have been put in place, and that there's ways that you've actually been kind of what you've been doing in your own spaces to make that those shifts. So I'm wondering if who would like to go first on those district level kind of shifts and how you're getting around some of our policies really that are being put into place so quickly that aren't necessarily the best policies for our Latinx communities. Olga, do you want to
And
go first
Carmen,
again?
Carmen, when we were speaking a couple conversations ago, one of the things that you had shared that has made a difference for you at Milwaukee High School is your hiring practices. And as a woman of color and a leader in our community, you have made just a significant impact in the way that you hire and retain. That goes together. That's absolutely critical, I will say. Perhaps that might be one of the things that you talk about is the shift in your school culture and your school community by the way that you hire staff.
Thank you. Yeah, and I do have to say, I think the shift in the culture, because I've been able and blessed to really bring in a diverse staff, is that it creates a completely different culture, right? You have all these different voices and experiences and cultures coming, and races and gender. That's really important to me, that our staff, and I know that that's something that's really important for a lot of people, is this idea that our staff reflect our student body. It makes a huge difference. The fact that I'm Latina makes a huge difference for not only Latinx students, but students of color. And students mentioned, like, they've said to me when we were in brick and mortar, what is going on? Like, what's going on, Ms. G? You've got you're hiring all these, there's different people, right? There's like different colors, different gender. And I go, what do you think about it? And they go, we love it. Like, they love it. And I think it allows us to do equity at a deeper level, right? And when I say that, you need to make sure, well, I know for me, it's very important that I need to make sure that I create space and that our community of color, our colleagues of color, feel safe and they feel supported. And for me, I hire differently. I hire when I look for mindset. And so our core values of being student-centered, relationships, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and future ready, those are embedded in our questions when we're doing interviews. I'm always on the lookout. So I could be in an Uber and I might meet someone and say, oh, what do you do? And they tell me some of their history. Oh, let me take your number down real quick, right? I hired this young man. I saw him on the football field coaching. And I said, who is he? Because I could see the way that he interacted with our students. And even when I saw chaos, he was the calm in the storm. And I said, he has something I want. And so I went, and he works with some of our toughest kids. And I recruited him from another district, sorry, but he was, this young man is a young man of color, and he was in a different role, not working with kids. And he is so amazing, right? And when I got him here, he didn't have his high school diploma yet, and he needed that. And that's a policy. And that's a policy that we were able to push on and say, he is so good. How do we support him getting his GED, right? And then moving forward from that. And it's that kind of like trying to be creative, pushing on the system, advocating for these people that are so good for our kids. And I look for a mindset. I think we have to get out of that place where it's always about like, what are the skills that we traditionally value, right? The technology skills, the being able to have everything in this perfect way. When we have people that can build that those kids are going to listen to, that they have a way, they're like the kid whisperer. This guy's like a kid whisperer. And so for me, it's like, I know how he cares about kids. I know how he can support kids and how he builds relationships. And so those other technological pieces, we can teach that. And so I think like broadening how we look at things and view things, and also just recruiting, reaching out to colleges. Who do you have in your counseling program? This is what I need. I'll get a paid intern this year, right? If I'm going to have an opening next year. So there's just different ways that I've gone about it. And what it's created, I think, is this it's hard for people of color to be in a building where there are no people of color, right? When they're alone. And so what's happening is we're getting more and more folks, and it's great for our white staff and our white kids too. White students are telling me they love it. So retention, so that's how I recruit, because I'm always on the go. I'm on professional Facebook for professionals of color. I send emails out and things like that. And so I'm always recruiting and looking for that mindset.
So I think like one of the things that you mentioned is the recruiting piece as a way of kind of helping our Latino families in our BIPOC community. And I know Olga has talked about her PACs, her parent advisory councils that she's set up. So I would like if you could touch on that. I know we have about 20 minutes, so want to make
Yes,
sure. I get to that
thank you,
piece.
Karen. I will be more than happy to do that. I can relate to Carmen. I tend to do the same things. I'm out and about and in the community, and I tag people, and I try to. One of my roles in life is to mentor. I like to see myself as someone who can, bring the best out of people. And one of the reasons I loved teaching was because I was a high school teacher. It was because I was able to do that with the youth, seeing the potential in them and encouraging them, and then advocating on their behalf for opportunity and resources. And I try to do that now with adults that I meet out in the community. And hey, you would be an awesome teacher, or you can be an awesome counselor. Have you considered? So I am fortunate that in my district we have amazing pathways now that that allow our staff, especially our classified staff, to take advantage of opportunities to go back to school, get a teaching degree, a counseling degree, go into social work. And so that is one of the, under our equity policy, one of the strategies that we are working with, because we also see the need of increasing our staff of color. And so, I see us as leaders who are engaging in anti-bias and anti-racist work. I think that in order for us to really begin to find solutions and to create change, we need to see ourselves as anti-racist educators. And so I love the work that we're doing in our district. We have an amazing school board that believes in this work, and they are wanting also to engage in anti-racist work. And that just to me is inspiring. And so with that, moving into our PAC phenomenon, we several years ago started with a migrant education PAC. And our parents began to see themselves as parent leaders and as equal partners with the education system. And they started asking questions around, how do we organize and how do we begin to influence change in the schools? How do we work with principals so that they can begin to, purchase books that are in Spanish? We have a dual language school, and we go into the library, but there are no Spanish books. How is that? And so, under my leadership with the family engagement team that I support, they have felt so confident and supported and empowered that they speak the truth. And they started asking about how can we begin to include other parents, not just migrant parents. We need Title I parents, English language learner parents. We need more than just a migrant PAC. And by the way, we also need PACs in the schools. We had started with a district level PAC, and it served as an advisory council to the leadership.
What does PAC stand for?
Parent Action Committee or Parent Advisory Committee. So it's a Latino Parent Advisory Committee. And so they started asking for help. They wanted the support of the family liaisons to organize their own PACs at the school level. And pretty soon, in less than a year, we had several PACs at the elementary levels. Right now, we have PACs in middle schools and PACs in high schools. And those are groups of Latino parents who are organizing to position themselves at a level that is that allows them to organize towards participatory power. And they want to have a say in what happens. And so 2 years ago, we also had PACs and PTAs and PTOs start to work together and to find ways to collaborate. There have been some challenges with, the communication piece. Some of our PACs have parents that don't speak English, and so they, having to find interpreters and, ways to engage with the PTAs. PTA parents have been primarily white parents. I never thought we would get there, where they would see themselves as, at equal levels, responsible for working together. But they are doing it and they're making it happen. And there's such a beauty in seeing that collaboration and that empowerment. And then this year, it actually started last year, where we started seeing other groups asking about, how does a Latino parent group organize? We want to form a Black parent African-American PAC, or an Asian Pacific Islander PAC. We also have a Native American PAC. And so I'm just like in heaven right now with the PAC, phenomenon. And parents are now looking at, do we really call ourselves a PAC? Or is there a different name that we can, use to identify who we are? But they don't want to lose the sense of, having influence in what happens in the school system. They want to be partners. They want to have a voice. They want to have a saying in what happens. And so, I just, I love that I see ourselves as not only as educators, but as cultural brokers. And so my family engagement team also sees themselves as cultural brokers. We are not parent educators. We are very familiar with systems, and we understand the education system so well. So our job is to really make sure that parents have access to information, that they have access to resources and opportunity. And that in itself allows the parents to organize towards participatory power and engage themselves and mentor each other and empower each other.
And it's great to see, often we hear, oh, Latino parents, they don't come to our schools. They don't want to participate. And we see that, in this case, we have them at every school. They're interacting with PTB or parent teacher associations. They are parallel. They don't have to be one necessarily. There's strength in having both. And you talked about being the anti-racist piece at the beginning, and I wanted to actually bring it to Perla and talking about her elementary age students and talking about race and anti-racism with Latinx students in their home. And we had a conversation about that and the impact. And what are some learnings that have happened when we're talking about race in their homes right now?
Yeah. Well, it's something we're thinking and talking a lot about. It's what we've kind of narrowed it down to is that there's just one additional step in the pre-planning of a good, strong lesson, which is consideration for what the home environment is. It's a piece of our lesson planning that previously we hadn't had to consider who else might interrupt a conversation or have an issue with it that in real time could interrupt the flow of instruction. And we, in conversations with teachers, we've reached agreements that, first and foremost, we will continue to have these conversations with students. That is non-negotiable. That is the work that we're doing. It's our job to create a space for students to make sense of things that don't make sense. And right now, when it comes to the racial pandemic that we're all in the middle of, it doesn't make sense. And our students deserve educators that aren't afraid to tackle that. And again, to help them make meaning. We are in no way, shape, or form trying to create 500 students that believe exactly what we believe. That's the opposite of what we are trying to do. We want spaces where students can think critically, where we can model looking at an issue from different perspectives, anchored in, you know, what our own moral compass tells us, what our families tell us, what our upbringing is. And we are committed to continuing to do that work. Some of the agreements we have is if teachers are concerned about a particular subject, then they've agreed that I will always have a heads up, because it's just it's a mutual respect. I respect my staff. I have their backs, but give me a heads up so I know if I'm going to be bombarded or have people here. I also am happy to join classroom conversations, even if it's as a participant with that co-host authorization, so that if there is a concern, I could quickly maneuver certain calls or certain participants on a Zoom session in a classroom into a breakout room with me, so that the teaching and the lesson continues to flow.
And one of the things you had mentioned, Perla, was that the realization that for many of our Latinx staff, what's happening around race right now is traumatizing for ourselves. And then to go in and teach these lessons to our students can also be difficult. And that was a new perspective. And I don't know, it was something I hadn't paused to think about since we're moving so fast. But
yeah. I mean, I think especially when it comes to the issue right now of the election. So I remember when I taught third grade, I mean, election teaching is the best, because it's such a real time example of democracy, and the way that, I mean, we could teach so many different things when it came to elections and, you know, your role as a civil servant. And I loved teaching around election time, and then we would vote in class. But I was never teaching children about an election in a time that the outcomes of the election could be so detrimental to me, to my family, to people that I love. And I could teach it really, I always knew who I was voting for, but I could separate that with my lessons. And I think that right now, asking staff to do that, we are asking them to, because we know our role and we're paid with taxpayer dollar. We know the rules, you know, and we're trying, but it is an emotional burden to as teachers who are so deeply connected to what is happening politically right now, to continue to create these spaces and try to separate the impact that they are feeling from that instruction. And I feel like the best we can do is just tell them, thank you for I know I don't know what it's like, but thank you for showing up every day, for not leaving, for sticking with this. And I just go back to, how can I help? What do you need? How can I help? But I don't think that enough of the educational leadership realizes all the heavy lifting, and the technology is a part of it, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the emotional toll of the awesome responsibility that we have to these students when we are carrying so much in our souls.
And when you,
Yeah,
I think
that's so spot on. I'm sorry, Karen.
Shelley, you had talked about when at the beginning, you know, we're dealing with race, we're dealing with issues of language and culture, and then also for our Latinx community, immigration status. And I know, Maida, would you like to speak to some of the, not necessarily just about immigration status, but the impacts of this on the students and families that you're trying to serve?
You know, it's funny that you asked me that, because I was in a, I'm also the migrant ed director for one of the districts that I work for. And we just had our first meeting last week, and I was wondering, how am I gonna meet my freshmen? You know, I didn't get to greet them on the first day. I didn't get to do home visits this year. And I'm in this meeting, of course, they're all teenagers, so they have their cameras turned off. And this little girl, I told her who I was, and this little girl types in the chat, hay redadas, ahorita hay muchas redadas y no sé qué voy a hacer si nos recogen, porque no voy a poder tener un abogado. So she mentioned the raids and said that if she or her family are picked up, they're not going to be able to have an attorney. And I'm thinking, wow, like we just met and she's already expressing these fears. And I'm thinking, that's how isolated our kids are right now. And that's the desperation that they're feeling right now, which goes along to what Perla is saying. Like normally when we're in a building, the kids all have lunch with their teachers. There's always, those people that they're able to connect with or confide in. And I'm thinking right now, who are they talking to? Who are they confiding in? And at the same time, because we're not in a building together, how do I provide, what information can I provide her? How do I provide it to her? And then I don't even know if the information that I have is accurate because things are changing all the time. And I reached out to a couple of friends and I'm like, what do I say? What do I do? Because if this little girl's feeling this way, how are her parents feeling? How are other kids feeling? And how do we provide resources, information? And how do I let her know, Mija, it's going to be okay? Because I don't know if it's going to be okay.
What you're saying, Maida, is so real. And I think one of the first steps in addressing trauma that our students and families and staff are experiencing is recognizing that it's real, it's valid. We can't begin for a moment to assume that we know how somebody else is living their life. They are the expert of their life and how this impacts each of us differently. And holding that space for staff and holding that space for students is critical, and for our families as well. The first step in recognizing, number one, the trauma exists, and creating those safe spaces for students to be able to express themselves and then being able to point them in the right direction. We don't have a container for all of the answers, and we don't have a container for all of the resources, but we see 126 people right here on this one particular Zoom call who are leaning in, who are curious, and who want to work together to find some of the answers for that. It's critical, especially right now where we have a heightened sense of polarization in our community. Regardless of outcomes, there are winners and losers based off of how people's identities are perceived, and if they feel as though they're going to be a targeted person by a policy, an existing policy, or a proposed policy, or legislative or executive action based off of the color of their skin, their gender identity, the language within their home. And these are real conditions for our kids that we need to think about on a regular basis. Each one of you has talked about that. And I so appreciate, Olga, you mentioning the need for us to keep focusing on that culturally responsive approach through an anti-racist lens, and how we do that. And to tie that back to what Carmen had said, by when we center our students, when we center our Latinx students for this conversation, and we design education, family communication, family support, school policy, comprehensive distance learning supports communication around our students who have not had the privilege of being as engaged as their English speaking dominant culture peers in the past. When we design here, each child benefits in the system, and we've guaranteed a better opportunity for our students who are at the center, focusing on our Latinx students. It's incredible. Perla, you were talking about embracing the difficult conversations and the need for us to raise critical consciousness amongst our students, our staff, and our families. Leaning into difficult conversations, I'll air quote difficult. Difficult is because it challenges the status quo. And then when that happens, we have to ask ourselves and ask our staffs as well, status quo keeps certain people comfortable, and it keeps certain other people quite uncomfortable for some very obvious reasons. And we name that when we start talking about difficult conversations. And when we're asking our kids to think critically, it's about them examining issues from multiple perspectives instead of a single side, instead of only one person's single story. And it helps them be able to see where is privilege and where is oppression within any of these decisions that are happening in my community right now. Who benefits and who doesn't? And then what is my role? And that need to raise critical consciousness. And if we're doing that through a culturally responsive lens and respect, then it maintains the dignity. It doesn't necessarily make it easy to have the conversations, but we become more fluid and we become more practiced, and then we can do it better each time for each other. I appreciate each of you raising all of these concerns. At this time, I'm recognizing that it's just a few moments right before 5 o'clock and our session ends tonight at 5:15. I wanted to go ahead and open up the chat so that if you had a question, you could type it in. We'll go ahead and continue the conversation. And if you have a specific question, Karen or I will call out the question and then ask our panelists.
Shelley?
Yeah.
I do want to share quickly, just because if anyone has any suggestions, and they could drop it in the chat for me, because I'm shamelessly going to ask for help every time I'm in a group of people. These days, I need all the help I can get. We are going to pilot with, we've targeted 4 families we have parent teacher conferences coming up, goal setting conferences. And what we've talked about is that we want our, especially they're all Latino families, we want them to understand that we see them as a unit now, because we're in their home. They're in our home, we're in their home, that we understand that sometimes it's hard to hear, and we can hear the other teacher because the kids are sitting right next to each other. So we're piloting with a handful of families doing a family conference. And so we've created a template where we will start by asking the family, what is working? Give us some idea of what's working, what's not working, and how can we help to address what's not working? And then we're going to go through a process then where we will identify, here are some things about your family and the way that your family has structured learning on this platform that we just really want to thank you for. And then we're going to go student by student and say, now this person, and all the teachers will be on this call. And so I'm hoping it goes well. What I don't want is for it to feel like, oh my gosh, all these teachers are here. I don't want it to feel like we're bombarding families, but I want us to just own that, we get it. I want the parents to be able to hear that, to see that the 6th grade teacher is hearing what I'm telling the kindergarten teacher. This is why my 6th grader sometimes is late to your class, because they're helping the kindergartner. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I can let y'all know how it goes after next week. But if there's any ideas or suggestions, I would love them.
Great.
I'll turn this one to Olga. One of the questions in the chat, we have a couple. Thank you so much for going ahead and continuing those. Chris has written in, how has anyone considered how to help our abuelitos who are caregivers for many of our Latinx families? And I would tag onto this that Olga and Karen, we started another conversation about ways to help families through the PAC idea, but across schools and across districts and across our state. Olga, do you want to talk a little bit about that and that idea?
Of course, yes. When we talk about the Parent Action Advisory Committee, we're really talking about anyone in the family that has the guardianship role. And so our family engagement team has been amazing at meeting with tios, abuelitos, older siblings, madrinas, padrinos, and really coaching them around how to ensure that they are understanding the systems which within the school their children attend. And so one of the things that we are very mindful of is that in order for an abuelito or a tia to call the school and try to get information about the child, they need to be in the registry, right? They need to be, their names need to be included into Synergy so that they can be given the access. And so some of them have needed coaching around how to do that. Some of the parents have needed some coaching around how to ensure that you have those emergency contacts updated, that you have the information in Synergy updated in regards to who can call the school to access information about your child. And so that is a piece that we started picking up on a few years ago with that phenomenon in the Latino culture. It's very, very common, very normal for a parent to, allow the tío, the padrino, the abuelito to take charge of the education of the child. And that happened in my family. I raised 2 nieces and 1 nephew. And I was the sole advocate, educational advocate for them. And so that has been something that, we are very knowledgeable and aware of in our district. And so family engagement is critical. You know, it's not just parent, it's family. You know, we are about providing wraparound services for families and ensuring that, you know, it's not only the parents and the children that have the resources and the supports, but that anyone in the family that is in need of that will have access to that.
Another resource is at Education Northwest. We are going to be coming out with like 7 or 8 modules for the abuelos and the tias and the tios that around technology and how to interact with school, like actual things, activities that they can do. So we're just in the final stages of translating those, and we're gonna make some short videos of how, like, it's a 1-pager, like the module is a 1-pager, but I was thinking of we could use it with your parent groups or your migrant ed groups. And if we did it in Spanish, we can model some of the activities so they could start trying out, the abuelos and, you know, abuelitas. And I'm actually going to use my own parents because they're helping me with my own kids and as the guinea pigs of for the video. So you might see my family in the videos, but we're going to get those out in the next month or so, and they'll be free and available for people to share out and use with their families. We're also going to start organizing, we're going to have another meeting. We're going to start a little bit smaller, but having the parent groups, leaders from around the state coming together to learn about what other parent groups are doing around the state and having those conversations so that we can start that concientización, right? Consciousness raising. And we want a leader from the district plus 4 parent leaders from that area, because we know that we are going to need a school leader to help them navigate the systems in the school system. So that's one of our next meetings that we'll be having, or webinars, I guess, but with the parents in Spanish.
For the parents and
parents.
Specifically, yes. So we've reached out to some of our colleagues across the state, and you're certainly welcome to email each of us to Karen. You can find her on Education Northwest website, and I'm located in the North Clackamas School District. If you would like to have some of your parents involved in a conversation across parent groups of how to lift and support one another. I'm looking at some of the other
conversation is going to be in Spanish. So just to give you a heads up on that one.
Yep. I love the comments that are coming through the chat and the ideas that you're sharing with one another. Thank you so much for that. I also wanted to just raise that there have been some wonderful questions about how to hold these conversations that are about anti-racist work in your schools and in your workplaces. Carmen, would you like to take that question?
Sure. So I think this is really important, and I think there's a lot of fear out there with our staff around this. And I feel pretty fortunate working in the North Clackamas School District and equity being one of the pillars. So when I got here, like, we had an equity committee, and that equity committee in 2 years has really grown. And the equity committee really took it upon themselves to create a ton of professional development. So for us, professional development around equity doesn't happen once a year. It happens every single time we meet. It's embedded in everything we do. We had a lesson yesterday, actually, with our community and connections class, and that's more around the social and emotional well-being of our students. And there were some things in there around equity, and that caused a little bit of fear with my staff, because what happens if someone in the background or a parent gets in there, or all of those fears that come out. And I told my staff, we also provided support with, like, if you want to reach out to an admin that can do it with you and that kind of thing. But my staff, I said, you are the most equipped at being able to do this. You've practiced for this for 2 years. And I think, like, once they got through that lesson, it was easier for folks. And what we found was that students, some of them did a word wall, they did surveys, but so many students were talking about what's on their mind, and it was around racism, it was around the election, it was around feeling powerlessness, it was around Black Lives Matter, it was around our Latinx community. I mean, all of these, and these were all of our students, not just our brown students that are feeling this way. Like, they also feel powerless and they want to make a difference and they want to make sure that their peers are okay. So I think that part of it, and I heard my staff as well, and this is something that our equity committee will be working on, is we can role model, right? I do, you do, I do, you do, we do. We can role model that. And I think that being actually able to have those tough conversations, because I think it's great that we read these books, Courageous Conversations, right? That we're looking at teaching tolerance, but we have to be in action, right? And the more that we're in action, the easier it becomes. And kids know, right? And so one of the things I want to be careful about is when it's a lesson that the entire staff is supposed to, all the teachers are supposed to give, and some teachers don't feel comfortable, come alongside of them instead of not having them do it, because kids told me that they notice who does them and who doesn't. Now this happened before, and they said that they know right away, well, this teacher might not want to talk about it or might not feel comfortable. So I think coming alongside people and walking them through that, we as people of color, we're afraid too. With the hiring and stuff, we get those comments. You hire only brown people. You know, those kinds of things that we also have to deal with. So I think those conversations, I think equity for rural districts and other folks, it's something that needs to happen all the time. It needs to be embedded in everything you do. You need to look at policy and look at like, who does that policy benefit? Who does it leave out? I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that, but to bring in folks that can help with those conversations, I think is.
There were several questions about staff and how do you bring your staff along? How do you work with your staff to build that capacity? So I don't know if Mayra, Perla, or any of you actually would like to speak to that question.
This is my first year as a principal, so I'm learning from Perla. I've been taking notes. But I'm using right now, the initial conversation has been around the All Students Belong policy and what that means for our school and what it means for the classroom. So that's the conversation that I'm having with my staff right now, and letting them know that, like what Perla was saying, if they're presenting multiple perspectives and our goal is to teach our students how to think critically, I'm going to support them. And I will be, and I've offered to be there in their classroom when they're having these conversations with their kids and presenting these lessons. And I've told them that I will back them up when a parent calls or emails with any type of concern, but I want to know what the structure was in the classroom. So yeah, like what Carmen and Perla was saying, I join in. I'm another student in the classroom.
That's brilliant. I love the things that are coming in the chat about modeling and just really being present. And Araceli had a question about moving staff from talking to doing and how to come alongside. So thank you also for all of those examples and ideas. It starts by knowing what it is you stand for, knowing who you are and the skin you're in and how you present to the community, how you see the world, how the world sees you, and then really finding out what is it that you believe in. And I would say that would be step one in coming alongside of staff to become really clear. When we say we're about equity, when we say we're about anti-racism, what does that mean to you as a practitioner? And how does that show up in your lessons? What does it sound like, feel like? What does it look like? And if for a student to experience that in the classroom, what would it be like for them? Those might be some of the initial questions and wonderings that I would pose to staff right alongside with them. And it's not a gotcha. It's a, I've got you. I've got you. We are together in this conversation for the betterment of each other, for the betterment of our kids. And that's how we chip away at the things that have been systemic barriers that have buttressed education to hold on to status quo, because it's going to change. And we are empowering our kids through that critical consciousness, which is so exciting. I'm so grateful to each one of you for being here on this Zoom call this afternoon. There is a hunger for this work. Carmen, did you want to have one more thing before we close out tonight?
Just one more thing before we close out. When you talked about like policies and just things that we do, we just moved into a brand new gorgeous building that overlooks the river, right? And so there's a couple rooms that are on the 3rd floor that are prime real estate. Like I was hoping I could get one of the rooms and make it my little condo or something. But anyway, When I was figuring out where people were going to land, I wanted to, there were these 2 rooms, and I have 18 students that were dual identified special ed and ELD, and I didn't want them having separate classes. So I asked 2 teachers to do co-teaching last year, and they were able to bring these 18 students together so that they were getting that one class and getting the special ed and ELD support. So when I was thinking about where am I going to place people, I placed people in different hallways, and these 2 rooms, I said, I'm going to give to my special ed teacher and my ELD teacher. Now that's not how we do business, right? We put our ELD students out in the portable, in the dungeon, in the basement. We put our special ed kids somewhere else as well. And they had to draw straws of which room they would get. But these 2 teachers got these 2 rooms, and that was intentional because I want our students to know that they matter, they're valuable. And that's just an example of how we can look at things differently sometimes and what an impact that will have on our students.
And I think like thank you, Carmen, our Latino families and students, they have a right to be here. They have a right to an education. They have a right to be in our classrooms. They have a right to be asking for a new Chromebook or for a place to study, or they have a right to the food that we are serving in our schools. That is their right. And so I wanted to name that. And I also wanted to, as a Latina educator, I wanted to speak to the Latinos, and Latinx on this call and just say, when your heart tells you something, or your brain is saying, this isn't right, what we're doing right now, you're right on, you're spot on. And you have to stay true to your core because, and believe in your core, that little voice, that little something in your stomach, because you are right. And if the rest of the system is saying, do something different, go with us in this river, and you're like, no, we're going this way. We got to go this way. Use that voice when you feel, use it for your students, use it for your families, and believe in that core that you hold true, and those values that you hold true.
Y que no estamos pidiendo un favor a nadie.
Mm-hmm.
No estamos pidiéndoles una limosna a nadie. It is a basic right.
Mm-hmm.
So, que no se, si hay padres ahorita en la línea, que no se sientan mal por exigir, porque ese es su derecho. No nos están pidiendo favores. That's our job. Mi trabajo depende de ustedes. El trabajo de los maestros depende de ustedes. Ustedes son nuestros jefes. So, ustedes díganos lo que ocupan, díganos lo que estamos haciendo mal para nosotros mejorar el servicio que les estamos proveyendo. Los distritos son de ustedes.
That one last thing I just want to share is that we as educational leaders also must uphold accountability for for other white educators. It is not okay to just be to not be racist. Mm-hmm. To be anti-racist, it takes that critical consciousness and puts it into action. What are you doing with the new knowledge, with the new information, with the new tools that you have that you are accessing? What are you doing with that? That's when the real change begins.
Right on. And to tag on to Karen, that voice, that's your superpower, friends. And you can hone that skill and listen to it and act on it. Just as Olga said, it is more than anti-racism is actionable. And it's every day in the everyday steps that we take. You took steps by leaning in today and being curious about how to help shift the critical consciousness and raising that critical consciousness of how we as a collective system can do better for our Latinx communities. I want to thank each person for coming tonight. It's late in the afternoon. You have a full plate with CDL. As you were each talking about it, I was seeing the head nods across the Zoom screens on all the different tiles, and we're connecting with one another at that deep level. I want to just close by 2 things. First, some advice from a colleague to a colleague. Breathe every day, multiple times. Let go of perfectionism. We heard that from our panelists. We are learning too. Embrace relationships with your colleagues, with your families, with those in your own personal circle. Remain authentic and listen to that inner voice. Seek hope and meaningfulness in your work. Partner, togetherness, team, anti-racism, and culturally responsive practices. If that is our center, we will chip away and we will make a difference. We don't have every answer, but we are going to find some of the right answers that are going to make a difference for our students and our families here in Oregon and across our region that will make a difference for them. And we will finally be at a place where we say, when every student matters, all students belong and all students will achieve. It's not an afterthought, it's the first thought. I wanted to thank each of our panelists one more time. You have my gratitude. I am honored to know you amazing women. Thank you for sharing your stories. And I want to also thank my partner in this work, Karen Perez. She has been my colleague for a long time, and she and I have amazing conversations, which spurred us on to say, what would it be like to have a fishbowl conversations where some of our other colleagues could learn from the wisdom of some of our friends here on the panel tonight? And we have another opportunity coming up. Karen, would you like to speak to that one?
Yes, so we have two on Monday, October 19th from 6 to 7:15. We'll have a session in Spanish for our parent leaders, and that will come with a leader from their district. You can email me. I'll put my email. I think I put my email in the chat for that. And then the second one next month, we'll send out again information. We're going to do a session on boarding school policies and the impact on our Native students of today. And so it's about the boarding school policies that occurred here in Oregon and how those are impacting our Native students.
So our next focus will be on our Native American and Indigenous communities. And Karen and I are involved in conversation about race, equity, language, culture frequently. And we decided, you know, this is a bigger conversation than just the two of us, and we can learn from each other in a bigger community. So please look forward to additional opportunities for us to come together. And through cultural humility, we can learn from one another and strengthen deeply. I'd like to wish each of you a wonderful evening. Stay healthy, stay safe, be curious about learning, and stay in that positive space of hope and togetherness, because we are making a difference for our kids and families. And it starts with each one of you in the leadership that you do every day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shelley,